that the self is an illusion. This is so hard for people to get. I think most people have never even thought about the self at all. So
Right.
help us understand, A, what you're talking about here, and B, how it would be at all useful for us in our daily lives.
Well, I mean, so the utility is kind of a separate question. It is useful because when you look at the nature of your suffering psychologically, the self is really the string upon which all of these negative states, mental states, are strung. I mean,
Yeah, but I think a lot of people listening to this might feel like, I'm not suffering. What are you talking about? I'm not. No, there are no crows pecking out my innards. I'm fine.
yeah, and so those people are difficult to reach with an argument that suggests that if you'd only look more closely at your life, you would discover that you're moved in each moment by a sense of dissatisfaction that may in fact be unacknowledged, right? So like you're just moving on to the next thing, but there's a stress in your life that is motivating more or less everything you do. I mean, your life has the character of a kind of long emergency, and yet there are people who are happy enough or lucky enough or positive enough that if you ask them, well, are you stressed out? Are you moved by a profound sense of dissatisfaction? Are you overlooking the present moment, kind of compulsively trying to get on to the next thing, even if in the present moment is full of the thing you thought you wanted a moment ago? They're kind of they're deeply insensitive to the dynamics of what's happening, and if you have a satisfying enough life for long enough, yeah, you can spend years and just seeing no point to this kind of consideration. Well, that's fine. You're a very happy person, who's very lucky, and not in a lot of physical pain, and no one's died. And you're one of these people. You're probably not Jewish, but you're probably one of these people who don't think about death, right? That's like you're not actually thinking about the possibility of your parents dying or your kids dying, or
Just for those of us, anybody wondering there, that you're half Jewish.
Yeah.
Between us, we make one Jew.
Right. Yes.
And by the way, we're not related.
We're not related.
Yes,
no,
yeah.
no, it's a different strand of Judaism. But so yeah, you're not. There are people like this who just and there are many good ways. I mean, this is a psychologically strong way to be. It's nice to be resilient, right, and not to suffer much. So some of you get frustrated, but the thing you were counting on doesn't happen, and you spend 2 minutes being disappointed rather than 2 days or 2 weeks, right? So there are people who are very lucky just by dint of genes and upbringing, and they're not shopping for a path to enlightenment because they don't see a problem, right? It doesn't mean there isn't a problem. It doesn't mean that they're not going to crash and burn sometime, right? So a lot of what spiritual life is, and contemplative practice is a kind of training for the bad times, right? So you're kind of getting ready for the worst day of your life, right? And the worst day of your life is coming, right? If it hasn't happened already, it will happen eventually, right? And now you're with any luck, your bad times will not be as bad as humanly possible, right? It's possible to have, just an unendurably bad life, right? And we're all hoping we get luckier than that, but. And if you have the free time to listen to this podcast, you probably are luckier than that. But there's just no telling what's going to happen to any of us in the future. And in the future, as in the present, your mind is all you have, right? Your mind, your ability to be happy or be at peace in the midst of what is happening is whatever it is in this moment. And if it's untested in this moment because you have everything you want and you're comfortable, well, then you don't really know what tools you have to work with when the wheels start coming off. And people who have thought a lot about this have discovered that there are some tools that are worth having in hand. And when you become sensitive to how it is you suffer, there's not a lot going on there. They're not novel processes. It's just whenever you're suffering, really suffering, you are lost in thought. I mean, you are thinking, and these blows are meted out by your own mind on itself through this automaticity of just thinking without knowing that you're thinking. So the next thought arises, and it seems to be you. It seems to be what you are, and you feel that you're the thinker of your thoughts. And this is kind of paradoxical. You think that you think you're the author. A thought just arises, right, from who knows where. You certainly don't see it arise, and you certainly don't author it. But being identified with it carries with it the felt sense that you are the thinker. It seems to create a thinker that is separate from the thoughts. So if you're listening to me now and you don't really get what I'm saying, you might be thinking, well, what is this guy talking about? Right? So that thought, what is this guy talking about, just emerges, and it feels like you, right? The sense of self is a product of not seeing a thought as a thought arising in a larger condition of consciousness or the mind. And meditation training is a way of recognizing the prior condition in which thoughts and sensations and everything else arises. And at a certain point, you can notice thoughts themselves arise and not be any more identified with the voice in your head than you are with my voice. I mean, so I'm in understanding what I'm saying now. Just notice here. So if you're a speaker of English, you are, through no intention of your own, helplessly decoding the sounds I'm making now and understanding them. Right. So these, like, you can't. It's interesting to consider. I mean, you have absolutely no free will here. So you can't decide not to understand what I'm saying. I mean, that's just the word, the sound is coming in and it's meaningful to you. If you don't understand something I said, well, then you don't understand it through no free will of your own. I mean, you can't. This is being imposed on your mind, one way or the other, and your own thoughts are just like this. They just arise. Right? And you don't actually know what you will think next any more than you know what I'm going to say next. Right? It feels like you in a way that my voice doesn't feel like you. But it is, if you pay attention, fundamentally just as surprising. It's just as novel. It's just as ungoverned by you. You're not choosing it. You can't. To choose what you think would require that you think it before you think it. Right. I mean, how can you? I mean, there's a simple way to demonstrate this. So,
but can't you? I'm sorry to interrupt, but can't you direct your thoughts? Can't you say, "Okay, I'm going to sit down and think about pastrami sandwiches now"?
Yeah, but where did pastrami sandwiches come from? Right. So you can do that, but of all the things,
my Jewish heritage.
Right. Exactly. Yes. But so you had a choice there, or an apparent choice. You could have said anything, right? You didn't know. So, like, why did you pick? Of all the foodstuffs, I mean, probably hundreds of things you could have said there. I mean, you can't even explain why you went to food as opposed to cities or movies or relationships or famous people. Or, I mean, you could have gone to anything, right? Any category of thing to think about. But you went to food, and then you went to pastrami, but you could have gone to anything else that you're aware of. So, and we know, for instance, if we were scanning your brain at that moment, and with the brain scanner of the future, but I mean, this is virtually possible now, we could have told you, we would have known in the lab that you were going for food and pastrami before you knew you were doing that. Right? So, like, the consciousness is not the first to know that the word pastrami is going to come out of your mouth. Your pastrami sandwich circuits were already firing, probably for at least a second before. And if you had sampled your experience during that second, you would subjectively have felt that you were still in the process of making up your mind, searching for an example, right? So
I certainly didn't know coming into the podcast that the word pastrami would eat up this much bandwidth.
yeah.
I'm glad it did, just for the record.
But our minds are always like this, right? They seem familiar, right? But in each moment, it is deeply mysterious how any of this is happening. It's like just how you understand what I'm saying, how I get to the end of this sentence is something that is mysterious. And when I fail to do it, if I make a grammatical error, that's also mysterious. I mean, the successes and the failures are both mysterious. And again, there's no one in the driver's seat here. There are simply more thoughts and sensations and moods and all of the phenomenon of conscious life are simply arising and passing in each moment. And the sense that there's a rider on the horse is, again, that's what it feels like to be thinking without knowing that you're thinking, without recognizing the next thought emerge in consciousness. And when you can do that, what you find, and this comes back to your question of why any of this matters, is that you find that it's impossible to suffer the kind of classic negative mind states for more than a moment at a time. So, like, let's say you're angry, right, or terrified, or really anxious about something you have to do. Those mental states, again, are borne aloft in each moment by thinking. And if you have very strong mindfulness and can just like a laser beam shine your attention on the process of thinking, to really notice thoughts arise and pass away, and you can focus very clearly on an emotion like anger or fear. The half-life of these emotions, when you're no longer thinking about them, is I mean, it's just moments, right? I mean, you couldn't stay angry for. I mean, most people think they can stay angry for an hour, right, or even longer. It's impossible without just thinking about all the reasons why you have every right to be angry.
Just
right?
re-upping.
Yeah, you just got to keep. You have to keep producing this emotion based on the thoughts that are justifying it, and the only way to do that is to be lost in those thoughts. I mean, you can't actually. If you see the thought as a thought, it's like my voice in your head. It's just an object in consciousness. It doesn't have the same imperative. It doesn't link to emotion in the same way. And so, I mean, this way of being in the world cancels, all of the classical negative emotions and the things we do as a result of them. So just think of the difference between being angry. If someone does something that makes me angry, and I can be reasonably mindful, I might, stay angry for a few moments and then notice how angry I am. And then it begins to just fall off because I then notice that, I'm suffering for no reason, right? There's no, like, it's not equipping me to do anything useful. And I'm the one meting out this negative experience to myself. So, so the difference between that and staying angry for an hour or a day and speaking and acting on the basis of that anger is enormous. I mean, just think of how people destroy their lives and their relationships and their reputations based on just their negative mental state. So if you want to, just again, back to the pure utility and taking this out of metaphysics or philosophy or even, grand goals like enlightenment, if you want, being able to decide to drop your anger or drop your embarrassment or drop your anxiety because it's not useful is like a superpower in this world. I mean, most people don't have it. Most people are just lived by that. Like their full commitment. They're going to be as angry as they get, and then the time course is who knows what, and they will have said or done who knows what in the meantime. And you can see the consequences in people's lives. To decide, and again, this way of talking about it is a little misleading because the free will is not, is kind of the flip side of selflessness is, the free will is also an illusion, right? So it's not like there's a self who's deciding. But to speak, very kind of conventionally about this, to have the choice to no longer indulge this negative emotion that is leading nowhere worth going is a hugely empowering and hugely useful skill to develop. And meditation is the way to develop that. But beyond that, it's just a fact that to become more and more sensitive to the character of your own thoughts begins to reveal that for the most part, they're not, being lost in thought is not making you happy. It's not making you, it's like the way you want to be, the moments in life that come upon you that are your peak moments, the moments you keep trying to get back to, do tend to have this character of not being moments when you were just ruminating about your life.
Yeah, you're in the zone.
You're the moments of they've been called flow or peak experiences. These are moments where, whether it's through athletics or music or just creativity or sex or drugs, or something has caused your mind to just go full immersion into whatever it is. It's like the best food experience you've ever had. Like the first bite of your favorite dish, whatever it is. It's collapsing the distance between observer and observed, and people crave that for good reason. But what meditation is a way of having that experience on demand, regardless of what's happening. Right. So, and even in the midst of technically unpleasant experience. So, there's a kind of equalizing function here where meditation can equalize pleasant and unpleasant experiences, because you realize that the thing that is aware of pleasure is the same thing that's aware of pain, or joy and sadness,
and it's not a thing.
It's not a thing. It's just, and if you keep falling back into that position of just being the space in which these experiences arise, well, then that distance between, it just so happens, this is just kind of a happy accident, that being concentrated, which is really the opposite of being distracted by thought, has a kind of intrinsic pleasantness to it. And one of the things we like about flow experiences is this concentration of mind. And because when you look at, it's kind of strange that many of these things that are so satisfying when we're in the zone are satisfying at all. What is satisfying about, what should be satisfying about any of these athletic experiences, say? So shooting a basketball, right? Like if you just feel like you're completely at one with this experience of grabbing the ball, jumping, shooting, dribbling. This is totally arbitrary. What could be possibly pleasant about any of that, right? But being in the zone for that is incredibly pleasant. But so it is with everything else, dancing, or why would moving your body in this way be pleasant at all, right? But now, and it's not pleasant at all if you're, uncomfortable, if you're self-conscious, you don't know how to dance, people are looking at you, you're neurotic, well, then it's not pleasant. But if you know how to dance and you feel great doing it, and you're now doing it in a way that is where you're totally at one with it, where you're not a step ahead or a step behind.
You're not thinking about pastrami.
Yeah, you're not even thinking about dancing, right?
Right.
There's just no distance.
You're being danced.
Yeah. It's a completely arbitrary thing to do, but it's magically pleasant to do it. But and the component that is delivering the high, for the most part, there may be other things, but certainly part of it is just concentration. It's this feature of mind of just not being distracted anymore. Being distracted is a kind of stress that most people only overcome in a very haphazard way. I mean, they think it was the dancing or the basketball or the surfing or the sex or whatever it was that where they got there for a second and a half. But meditation is a way of taking responsibility for this process and dissecting out the variable that is actually universal, which is it's just the distraction versus the alternative, and then it's just the practice of non-distraction,